Attending SUNY Delhi during the fall semester of 2013 was one of the most interesting times of my life, despite how bone dry and boring that town was. When I first started school there, I was told that it would be cold, but I certainly didn't expect it to start snowing within the first 3 weeks of September. For the most part, it made the campus even less exciting, because a lot of people didn't have cars equipped to drive around in the snow, so no one could really go anywhere. But if you were like me, signed up for an on-campus parking pass, and had a car that could handle the small amounts of ice on the road, the back streets had some of the nicest views I had ever seen, especially when blanketed by a layer of snow. The only thing that I wish I had known to do was to be careful of what roads you drive on, because while Delhi wasn't a notoriously dangerous place, it still had its share of crazies. I remember it like it was yesterday. My friend Justin and I decided to go for a night drive toward the beginning of December and listen to the new Eminem track that had just come out. And we ended up going on one of our longer routes, not thinking anything of the relatively fresh snow that lined the side of the road. We made our way around the windy mountain roads and jammed out for about 45 minutes before I realized that we should have just stayed on campus. The gut-wrenching feeling that we were in trouble came to me as we made our way around a small bend, and I saw a small patch of snow in the road that must have fallen from one of the overhanging tree branches. I tried to slow the car down to ensure that it kept its traction, but it didn't react fast enough. Before I knew it, the tires hit the snow and lost all sense of grip on the road underneath us. I tried to maintain control of the car, but it was pointless. Before I knew it, we were heading straight toward the side of the road. We crashed right into a snow-covered ditch that ran along the side of the road, but thankfully neither of us was hurt. After making sure that we were both all right, we got out the car and assessed the damage. The car seemed fine, but there was no way we were getting it out the ditch on our own. Justin and I looked at each other and began messaging some of our friends for help, but no one was answering us. We didn't know of any good towing companies in the area, and I didn't have the best insurance at the time, so once we noticed that there was a house right down the road from us, we decided to go and ask for help. This was a huge mistake, though. We made our way down the road away from the car and then down the driveway toward the house that we saw. Once we got to the door, we knocked in hopes that someone would answer that might own a truck or something that could help us out of the ditch. But after a minute or so, when no one answered, we decided to head back to the car and start Googling the local tow truck's phone numbers. We were stopped before making it off the homeowner's porch, however, when we heard the sound of the front door creaking open slowly. Justin and I turned around to introduce ourselves, but quickly decided to make a run for it when we saw that the person who had answered the door was holding a shotgun in their hands. As we began running away from the house, all we could hear was the man yelling, "Get out of here! You come back and this will be for you," which was followed by the sound of the shotgun going off. We made it back to my car as fast as we could and immediately called the police and asked for help. Instead of waiting for the police inside my car, we waited behind a group of trees that was located nearby, because at that point, we were freaking out. We didn't know why that guy shot at us, but figured it would be best to stay out of plain view. When we saw the police lights, though, both of us emerged from the trees and explained what happened, and right away the police understood. The man who lived in that address had apparently caused, according to them, countless problems, and required medicine that he would often decide not to take. The officers helped us call a tow truck for my car and then went and spoke to the man, who I'm sure was happy to hear that we wouldn't be pressing any charges. You know when you see something that you can't quite explain, so you never really tell anyone about it? Well, that sort of happened to me in the winter of 2006, though I still believe that there had to be a rational explanation. The incident occurred when I was driving home from work one night in either late November or early December. I had left work around 10:45 that night as soon as I finished closing up the store, and by that point, The snow had begun to fall. By the looks of things, it wasn't sticking to the road though, so I had no issue as far as the drive itself was concerned. The same can't be said for the things that I saw though. As I made my way home, I left the town where I worked and began driving along the back roads that would lead me to my house when something caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't quite make it out as I drove past it, but standing along the side of the road was some sort of animal. I could see it clear as day because its dark-colored fur contrasted with the bright white snow on the ground around it. As I drove past whatever it was, I didn't give it a second thought. But as I continued to drive along, I couldn't help but feel like something was wrong. I began to slow my car down just in case, and I'm glad I did, because about a second after my foot began touching the brake pedal, I saw something go darting across the street. It ran by too fast for me to tell what it was, but if I hadn't been slowing down, I would have slammed right into it. I pulled the car to the side of the road and came to a complete stop so that I could catch my breath and try to calm down. However, as I sat on the side of the road, I could feel as if something was looking directly at me. I looked to the side of the road that the thing that I almost hit had run toward, and my heart stopped when I saw something standing just beyond the tree line. Again, it was easy to notice whatever it was because of its dark-colored fur. I tried my best to figure out what I was looking at, but all I could really tell was that it was on all fours. I was confused as to why I had seen two of these strange animals in such quick succession, but so far down the road from one another. It wouldn't have been possible for it to be the same one, so I knew something weird was going on. But I just tried to brush it off as being a coincidence and began heading back toward my house. The snow continued to fall as I slowly made my way down the road. And by slow, I mean that I was still going about 30 miles an hour. Way too fast for anything to have been keeping up with me. Yet somehow it did. As I approached my driveway, I could still feel as though something was following me. I parked my car and quickly looked into the rearview mirror to see if anything was behind me. When I didn't see anything, I assumed that it was safe enough for me to make it into my house. But I wish I had taken another second to look, because as soon as I stepped outside of my car, I could see whatever it was that had been following me, standing at the end of my dimly lit driveway. I sprinted toward my house as fast as I could, and thankfully the door was unlocked. I ran inside as fast as I could and slammed the door behind me before locking it in the deadbolt. Once I was inside, I ran over to the window to see if I could get a better look at whatever it was, but by the time I got there, it wasn't at the end of my driveway anymore. I began running from window to window hoping to find it, but at the end of it all, I couldn't see a thing. It was as if there was nothing out there the whole time. It snowed throughout the rest of the night, and by the morning any sign of tracks was covered, so there was no point trying to look into it. But it's surely a night I will never forget. One of my favorite parts about winter after having my daughter has always been driving around and looking at all of the lights and decorations that people have put up around their houses. And one year, I thought I would give Trina a nice surprise, and I decided to take her to a holiday light show that was about 2 hours from our house. It was something she had been talking about for a few weeks, and I figured it would be a memorable thing to do in the days leading up to Christmas. And I was right, just for the wrong reasons. The light show was great, and it was honestly some of the coolest decorating I had ever seen with my own eyes. But the drive home from the event wasn't quite as pleasant. By the point that it had begun to snow, we were still about an hour and 20 minutes away from our house. I did my best to drive slowly, and since there was very little traffic on the road, that wasn't really an issue. We were carefully making our way down the road when, all of a sudden, I began to lose control of the car. I screamed for Trina to hang on tight since I knew that we were going over the side of the road, and in my head, I thought it was all over. I mean, I didn't know how far the car was going to drop, but I knew that we were on a mountain and figured that it had to be far. Thankfully, the drop wasn't too steep, and though the car ended up going off the road, we only slid about 10 feet down the side of the mountain before being stopped by a grouping of big rocks. I made sure that Trina was all right before trying to figure out our best way out of the situation. I pulled out my phone with the hopes of calling for help, but sadly I didn't have any cell phone service. I thought about waiting in the car with my daughter until help arrived, but once we realized that the heat wasn't working, I figured our best bet would be to walk along the road until we could get help. Sadly, the hill that our car took us down was far too slick and steep for us to climb up it. I knew I had to make a decision. Just by looking at my daughter, I could tell that she was getting cold quickly, and it wouldn't be long until she was in some serious danger. The snow continued to fall, and I decided that we should walk along the side of the hill in hopes of finding a spot where we could climb back up from the road. That was a choice that I wish I had never made, though, as I quickly realized just how slick of a slope that we were on as soon as I picked my daughter up and began walking. I only took 2 steps before my feet slipped out from under me, sending both Trina and myself sliding further down the side of the hill and away from the road. We rolled for what felt like hours, but was likely only a couple of seconds before we were stopped by a large tree. I did my best to put myself between Trina and the tree, but in the process felt something snap in my right side. I screamed in pain as we both lay against the tree, but once I was finally able to catch my breath, I made sure that my daughter was okay. Thankfully, she said she felt fine. There was no way that I could get up and move like before, so the only thing that we could do was wait and hope that help would come. It wasn't until about 5 p.m. the following day that I saw the yellow flashing lights of the emergency vehicles that were looking for my car. I cried out for help, and after figuring out a good pulley system, the EMTs managed to get my daughter and me up the side of the hill and ultimately to the hospital, where it was determined that I had a broken rib. Thankfully, my ex-wife called the police when I didn't check in with her about Trina. She knew that something must have gone wrong and sent for help. I genuinely don't know how much longer we would have lasted out there.